Hello everybody. Today's demonstration is about inlays. What exactly is an inlay, right? Do we look at a brick wall and think that the mortar in between the bricks are those a type of inlay? And do we look at a book and look at the words? Do we think of those as the thoughts of the writer inlaid onto the blank pages? And if we look at Earth, do we think of humans as inlays on Earth to make it look more interesting? Well, philosophical points aside, today I want to show you how I do a inlay with epoxy, iron, and brass powder. So the idea of using epoxy and mixing with other stuff as an inlay material, I don't think there's anything new about it. I think the first person that saw this potential probably was someone who observed that the tree sap comes out liquid, but after a couple of weeks it turns into a solid. Somebody might have thought, hey, I could probably use that as an inlay material. And I have no doubt that the craftsmen, the artisans, and the artists of antiquity times were very clever and very creative in their uses of material, much more so than we are today, I think, because, well, let's face it, everything we do is a derivative of what they've already done, right? So there's very few new ideas being presented into the world. So recently, there's been several channels that have had used epoxy as an inlay material. For example, if you've seen Fabian's Tiny Workshop, you might have seen him use epoxy inlay into the shape of a flower. And if you saw Krtwood, you may have seen Kevin using a dye mixed with an epoxy and poured into the surface of a box. And you may have also seen Peter Brown, where he recently had made a tray, covered it with penny, and then poured on top of it a layer of epoxy. So there's a lot of creative uses of epoxy being used these days. But today, I want to show you how I used epoxy, iron, and brass to inlay this design. So the demonstration is going to pick up where I've already carved this design and these letters into the handle.
Just using a bit of green tape here to create a epoxy wall. This stuff stays fluid for quite a bit of time. And the other side has a ridge just to keep stuff from flowing all over the place. So I'm adding a bit of iron powder onto the surface here. I wanted to get this iron into the crevices so that it has a very nice and dark background, just in case the epoxy doesn't get it as dark as I want it to be. And I'm just brushing it on with a milk brush, and most of it actually is not in the crevice. And just give it a quick shake and tap, and most of it comes out. Right. So this epoxy is a 1:1 by volume mixture, and here I'm putting out about 3/4 inch diameter resin with a approximately equal volume eyeballing it hardener, and adding the iron powder directly into it, estimating about how much I need. I'm just eyeballing all of this, there's no measuring, and doing a little color match here so it's not quite as dark, so just add more iron. And this stuff gets about 24 hours to cure, and I don't know how long it stays perfectly liquid, but I think I've used for 10 minutes and there was no sign of it starting to harden. So depending on my schedule, I'll probably wait 4 to 8 hours between layers, and this takes a few layers to get it to raise the epoxy above the lettering. So the little bit of brass mixed into the resin, and it just added on the same way as I applied the iron stuff, and it just smears on and scrape most of it off, so there's mostly iron with a little bit of brass.
So just finished adding in the last layer of epoxy and iron and brass. I think this side has about 6 to 8 layers building up slowly, so now you can kind of see that the original design on there it's pretty much covered up now. So now I can take it down a few layers. So this is about, I think, 3 or 4 layers
going on here to raise the height of the epoxy to above the lettering. So I don't know if you can tell, but there is sort of a gold flaking in here. So I'm using a chisel to remove the corners. This stuff actually comes up fairly easily just with a chisel gliding against the side. And using a file here, again taking it to getting it close to the wood, almost exposing the wood. In some areas I'm actually exposing the wood. I'm scraping the handle with the chisel to produce a smoother surface for the finish steps. And it looks a little bit dull right now, but let me apply a little bit of shellac to give you a sense of what this looks like. At the time of this video, the mallet is not finished yet, but I want to give you a taste of what it might look like. And I can see the darkness of the iron contrasted with the brass produces to my eyes a hint of green. And I think how much green we see, it really depends a lot on our eyes.
So one thing you might be wondering is, how exactly do I get iron powder? Well, what you need is a diamond plate and some iron. And patience. A lot of patience. So, to get a pound of iron powder, it took several hammers. And of course I kid. You can just buy this stuff. Iron powder, brass powder, aluminum powder, stainless steel powder. These things are all available for purchase online. And I even thought about gold and silver powder, but for me, that was too cost prohibitive. So I hope you guys enjoyed this demonstration, and I hope you'll join me next week, where I should be uploading the video, the build video for this mallet.